Hello and welcome to Serious Insights for Admins. I'm your host, Kristi Campbell, and I am joined today by Alex Radovanovic. Dang it, I practice and everything. Radovanovic.
Yeah.
Haha, I did it. The staff BTA at Okta from our neighbor up in Canada. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Kristi.
And today we're going to talk about the different experiences and roles between being a solo admin, being on a business admin team, and working in consulting. So Alex has got kind of a great flavor of all three. And maybe you could start by telling us how you got started working with Salesforce.
Well, my story is kind of unusual because you hear all the stories about people becoming incidental admins. I'm very intentional admin. So when I moved to Canada in 2014, I was actually looking for a job, and I was looking for anything. Like, I have a master in linguistics. I was looking for like anything language related, marketing related. I was sending hundreds of applications. And at one point, it became really hard to track hundreds of applications, like where I applied, who replied to me, who declined me. And my husband, who's a software developer, suggested that I should look into Salesforce. Salesforce can actually help me track my job applications. So that's what I did. I opened my free developer org. I realized, oh my God, Salesforce can be customized to my needs. And pretty soon I was sending, again, hundreds of applications to different jobs, and also learning how to customize Salesforce to send myself email alerts to make sure that I don't have duplicate accounts. I don't send like duplicate applications for the same positions.
Right.
And it was hard because nobody was inviting me for job interviews. It was really depressing. And really accidentally, in one of the baby showers, my first baby shower in Canada, I talked to an owner of a small startup who talked about how hard it is to track customers and the sales in the Excel. And I just blurted out, oh, well, you should use Salesforce. I'm using Salesforce for something similar. And he was like, well, I don't know what Salesforce is. Can you tell me more about it? So I spent like a good 30 minutes like talking about what I learned, what I did with Salesforce. And that conversation ended with him asking me, well, will you come and implement Salesforce for me? So I pitched myself for the first consultant / admin job.
That's awesome. And it's really dovetails. Our last episode was about working with a recruiter and differentiating yourself and trying to be that intentional admin breaking into the industry. And one of the things we talked about was build out your skills, right? It's one thing to get the certifications, hey, get the t-shirt, and, list that you can do things. But a lot of the, if you can show experience, even if it's not from a job, right? But it's problem solving, it's learning, that motivation to learn as you go. And so I'm assuming then you were just one admin learning to build in a fresh Salesforce org.
Oh, well, luckily they also hired vendor to help them, and I actually learned on the job. So, like in the middle of the fire. And I think I learned so much in those first 6 months while we implemented Salesforce. And what's really good is that Salesforce helped them increase their revenue 300%. So they were bought by a large bank in Canada, which was kind of, a successful story. But at the same time, it left me out of the job because the bank they bought the company actually had their own Salesforce team.
Okay.
So, but I actually at that point knew the power of the Salesforce community. So I joined my Vancouver local community. I talked to people and told them that I'm looking for a job. And one of the admins for the large telecommunication company invited me to come for a technical interview. So that was my first technical interview for Salesforce. And I realized it's like nothing I did before, because I was actually asked how you can do this in Salesforce and what I worked before. But I passed the interview and I joined as an admin from one small company that was just implementing Salesforce to one of the largest, actually the largest Salesforce customers in Canada. They had 18 orgs at a time. I was working on the support, customer support org. And I continue learning so much and so many different things from the original one. So growing as an admin, realizing that admin in a small company and admin in a large company role can be totally different.
Sure. So you mentioned you're working in one of the 18 orgs, really. Did you come into a mature experience with a lot of governance and a lot of organized ticketing and sprint schedule kind of release cadence, roadmap, like official structure?
Well, not a lot of agile, not a lot of structure on the process side, but very much structured on the technical side. So how things like Salesforce have been very mature, like you mentioned, the configuration has been there, and there was a lot of requirement from the business side to improve the existing configuration. And at the same time, I learned that Salesforce is great, but there are a lot of other systems who communicate with Salesforce, and there's integration. So I started learning, oh my God, so I need to think like on a higher level how two systems, Salesforce and maybe another system like Informatica, actually can talk to each other. So that's like the next level of my admin journey.
I like it. Yeah, definitely. I think you start to see those connections in, are we already doing this somewhere, right? It's not just about moving out of spreadsheets, but there's other systems, especially today, right? There's sales enablement tools. You've got, different vendors that kind of you may grow into, right? Even as that, for that small company, the experience you get there can certainly translate a bit, but that might not be the best solution for, a large company that needs higher volume or more users or, whatever that might be.
My next step actually from TELUS was going into the Hyperwallet, which is a PayPal company. It's a smaller org within the PayPal that's focusing on B2B side of the business. And there I found a similar type of job, but the whole different organization of the process, like, like you mentioned, agile, following sprints, having totally different delivery management. So it kind of combined growing on that process side would actually prepare me going into the consulting world next. Because if I just went from the admin, like doing regular Salesforce technical job, like hands-on work, I would totally be lost if I actually went directly to the consulting and was focused with like project management and project scope and like scope creep and gathering the requirements and actually managing business and technical expectations.
Yeah, I definitely think there's being a junior person on a team and, kind of getting your homework, right? And researching and learning and figuring out the best solution and delivering that solution and kind of repeating that process, I think can be a great way to get started and, work with, so you can kind of see from a senior admin or an architect, kind of see how they're thinking and bounce ideas, but you still kind of ease into kind of the big conversations, right? But you're saying, so then when you moved to PayPal, that there was more of that consultative approach in terms of some of those concepts?
Oh yeah, because it's a very fast moving environment, so sort of like a startup, and there is no large organization, and the decisions are making much more frequently and in a faster way, and priorities are changing much faster than in a large organization, which is kind of what we see in the consulting world, right? You have a budget, you have a project, and then priorities can change depending on what's being delivered and how the constraints are happening. So it was a good prep for the consulting world.
That's interesting. One of my more recent role right before Cirrus, I was really a solo admin. We had an external team that we partnered with to do development, which again, we had a bunch of communities users, not as many internal users, right? So it was very interesting to part of what I kind of like you're saying, gateway into consulting, right? Part of what I was doing was the internal configuration and user management and those things, but also part of it was having the internal requirements conversations to document these tickets for our developers, right? And organizing that work, right? So it really helped me think more about that planning, right? Instead of and planning and explaining to someone what you want, right? A little bit different perspective than me going to figure it out myself. And, also having a resource to be able to consult with. And, you mentioned the community. I also started at a small company that had implemented Salesforce, but I was really the only internal admin. There were some people who were still there from the training, but there was no dedicated admin until I started. And I think having people to ask questions to, right, is really what got me started in learning about the button click admin and learning about people out in the community, because I didn't really have anybody, on another team to collaborate with to talk about the best approach.
Yeah, we talk about like admin versus consultant, but there is a really significant perspective that we should mention as well, and that's admin collaborating with consultants. Because I was, like you mentioned, and I was on both sides, and it really means a lot when you come as an external consultant, coming to work on a project. If you have an admin to collaborate with, somebody who actually understands the business requirements, the depth of the system, that you can collaborate your wide knowledge of the industry and different experience, like that's a really powerful combination.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting way to kind of from a business perspective to have a mix, right? That especially, we were able to scale that up and down on the consultant level when we had kind of large project pieces versus like maintenance mode, which we never really got to, because of course you want to build new fun things, which, like you said, will maybe change, right? You might make something and then having a partner to kind of split the features off that you need and help you to get to where you need for your release can be a way to kind of keep that, like you said, internal business user that really knows the business and of course knows Salesforce. But then having the bandwidth from a consultant perspective can also be really help drive the momentum.
There was a really good session in, I think it was TrailheaDX 2019. Jillian Bruce and Susanna St. Germain did a session on how admins are architects and can be architects, and how part of the admin job is also architect job. And I think that's really goes into the picture when we talk about admins collaborating with consultants, because admins usually know the roadmap. They know like the business roadmap, not just a technical one. So they can provide input to consultants, right? Because you're coming to work as a consultant, you're coming to work on a project, like maybe you're implementing workforce management for a service cloud, but admin is there to provide like a bigger vision for the company. Maybe they want to, have a new product. Maybe they want to open the community. So it's those information like that can help consultants make better decisions. So like that symbiosis is really useful for the company.
Interesting. Well, and you mentioned the ideas kind of when you actually are working for a consultant, right? The idea of SOWs and scope creep and right defining that's always that hard for me, right? Because I'm just a yes person, right? And because it's fun to figure this stuff out in Salesforce, right? That's why I like to do it. But it is easy, especially, internally, there isn't really that. I mean, there's kind of a concept of scope creep, right? You kind of have to say like, well, you want it now. Can we do a phased approach, et cetera. But in the end, they can pay me to do all the things. It's just a matter of priorities versus actually having to say no or go back to, a new agreement or like those kinds of time and money considerations.
I think that's one of the largest differences maybe between admins and consultants, among others that we just talked about. That's that different levels of decision making and responsibility. Because if as an admin you might work on a project, and if you need some additional time or you need to change priorities because of the business, you are not making that decision, right? You're being directed by your manager or the business. At the same time, as a consultant, you have to own the project. You can't allow the projects creep. Like that can't really happen, because that's going to impact your timeline at your different project, your different customers, the availability of your team. So like the impact is much more significant for the consultant, and the consultant should have at least higher level of decision making. What can be done within the project, what can be left for like phase 2 or cannot be included, right?
Yeah. And so when you moved into consulting, do you feel like there's more? On one hand, I feel like with consulting, the idea is you get exposure to a lot of things, right? But I also feel like the way I hear about staffing projects or kind of becoming a subject matter expert on things, it feels like you might kind of end up in a niche that then that's what you're doing on projects over projects, and you might not get as exposure to new things.
That's true. And I have to say, like, my wiggling way between admin and consultant, working with different clients and then working with just one org has kind of been like that, because I didn't want to be like pigeonholed into doing just one thing. And at the same time, you can't know everything. Salesforce is huge and it's keep growing and adding clouds and new features. So how kind of being expert in the platform is great, but then at the same time, you at one level, you can't really just go with the technical knowledge. You have to bring some of the industry knowledge, because you can't really design a solution without actually knowing how the business work, business principles, or what are the KPIs for the specific industry. So I think consulting allows that part of career growth, because as an admin in one company, you just learn that part of like how that company is doing within that industry. And if you move to a different company as an admin in a different industry, you might not have a lot of transferable knowledge. You do have Salesforce knowledge, but you might struggle from the start to understand if you go from, like I went from the telecommunication to the fintech industry. Like I struggled to do all the training to understand all the legal limitations, all the rules, all the compliance things that I didn't have in a different company. So I think consulting is forcing us to do that, like jumping from the project to the project. So we finally have to choose, like, okay, this is part that I'm interested in. This is part that I'm good at. I'm going to just specialize in this industry. What do you think?
I definitely think as, the internal admin, for example, at Cirrus, right? We've got about a 75-person company. Not everyone has seats, but I definitely am managing requirement gathering and t-shirt sizing of those things, and organization around priorities, right? There's certainly things that are maybe not hard, but I haven't done them before. And then again, the priorities change, right? It's the limited resource. But for example, my last role, I mentioned we had a bunch of communities users, and we currently don't use communities at all here. So it really was kind of a choice, right? Do you look for something? And I can see this in consulting too, right? Once you kind of find that thing, do you look to go down that path and narrow your focus? Or do you come somewhere where you own all the things? And, I can certainly outsource to a developer if I need to, but for the most part, I have to find that knowledge and create that collaborative experience in the community and in various channels to be able to make sure that I am finding the best solutions. And again, there's certain things that are products I'm just not using, right? So there's that maybe there's something I would love Commerce Cloud and CPQ, but it hasn't come up for me yet, right? So that's another kind of, if there's something specific that you have that industry experience that might play into that, then I think that can be helpful to kind of narrow down what you're looking to do and kind of directions for you to advance.
I actually also feel that industry experience is much harder to just learn. Like there is no course for the industry experience. Like if you want to use the Commerce Cloud of any of the Salesforce new features, you can go to Trailhead. You can do the training like Trailhead Academy. While if you want to understand how financial industry is working, you actually have to have some experience from the financial company, regardless of the role that you have. So at some point, even though you're like, doesn't matter if you're admin or a consultant, like you mentioned, using communities will, you can learn how to use communities through the Trailhead Academy. But having that holistic approach to the whole solution design, that's something that you'll learn over years specific for the industry. So even like, even if the company is like 50 users or 5,000 users, you do have an idea how processes are going to work. So I think that's what you have going on for you right now. Like, the benefit of you having that experience.
Right. I think consulting to me offers an interesting, you've got the BAs that maybe are driving the discovery, but they're not necessarily the people doing the work, I think, right? You've got project managers that are probably managing your time, like the time and the project level itself. So I think that can offer an interesting way to get into something adjacent to, maybe you start out as the BA person and then you're getting into being the actual configurator, right? And kind of finding, there's, I think, more flexibility in terms of kind of finding where you're going to end up fitting, but still all those things relate to working at a consultant, which we haven't even really talked about, right? You've got your huge consultants and then you've got your more boutique small consultants, right? So there's definitely going to be differences in terms of, the hours that you're putting in and your travel. And I don't know, to me, the variety can be appealing. But when I was working on really implementation consulting for a new product that got rebuilt on force.com, I feel like I built the ship and then you kind of set it off into the water and you don't know if it drowns, if it succeeds, or if people start using the things that you built, or, if they end up kind of rebuilding it, or so you get that variety and you kind of can find your place, but you don't really get to see your little baby grow up.
I can really relate to that. That's one of the reasons I went from consulting actually back to working as an internal Salesforce specialist. I went from I was consultant for 3 years and in a smaller company. And like you mentioned, in a smaller company, you get to do a lot. You get to do be a solution architect, design the solution. I also got to do some of the automation, some of the declarative development. I also got to do the business requirements and testing. So a lot has been I had much more control over the projects. But at the same time, because we were the small company, we couldn't take a large project for a large company because we just didn't have enough people or resources. And what really bugged me, like you mentioned, is I would build a project, we build a solution, the project is delivered, we're done with the customer. And then we did something custom. And then Salesforce, 6 months later, there's a new out-of-the-box feature coming out of Salesforce. And I'm thinking, oh, we should redo that. But we don't have the project, we're done with the client. And that was killing me. Like you mentioned, you build a ship, you send it. And then you don't know if it's stuck in some rocks or just flowing perfectly. So that's why I decided to, say goodbye to the consulting and go to the internal work again.
Yeah, one thing I think can also be interesting is that kind of an in-between place is managed services for consulting, right? So I know at Cloud for Good, that's something that they offer. There's some local people here in Charlotte that work on that team. So they have, as an external admin, a specific amount of hours that they're supporting, whatever that org needs. So it seems like an interesting way to kind of keep your eye on the ship, right? Or you're still on the ship or multiple ships. Maybe my analogy doesn't translate. And stay involved, but still have kind of that variety of different projects. I think could be an interesting angle, and have a larger team, right? So that you can ask other teammates and kind of grow and learn in different areas.
I think Salesforce Admin as a service I see it growing as well. And it might be a good thing to easily transition into the consulting world, because you are starting to work on multiple orgs. You still do the admin job, but you kind of getting a flavor of, those business requirements and managing the project delivery and managing timelines. So I think it's a good transition. I know that Cloud for Good actually has an internship program. So that's even better. You get to start as an admin, you get the support from your team, but you're also getting a flavor of consultant. You might be pulled back from a project without you have a deadline. You're admin for this company for 3 months. So
yeah, I think too, if people are kind of deciding, which either for their first role, kind of what they want to do, or if they want to make a change, I think it's really important to realize that you're going to go through phases of this, right? We've both talked about, I started here, I kind of I started in Service Cloud actually more than anything. And then I ended up working for a partner as their internal admin. I worked for a company that had external salespeople and was, not really, was a little bit larger, but not really adopting. And then to work for, like I said, a company with a customer community with thousands of customers, and all those had a little smaller teams, but some really great counterparts too. So the people and the projects, I think, are both considerations, but you may be in a place where you want to do consulting and you want to, to me, it can't hurt to try. If you are, a solo admin and you're either not getting the support that you need, you want to be on a larger team. I've definitely benefited from counterparts and facilitated my growth by collaborating with, even on small teams, right? I had at my one role at 3D Systems, I had really one counterpart who was more developer architect minded. And so we just worked really well together, and it really helped me learn and grow and try things. But so I think whatever you decide, getting a sense of the team that you're going to work on and understanding if you are the kind of person that wants to manage your own life and, figure everything out yourself and wear all those different hats, or if you want to join a team, whether it's a larger, if your company has 18 orgs, right? Like different, still a business specific team, or if, the variety of consulting and maybe some travel if you're into that.
I think we didn't mention that, like admin, we're pretty clear on like what admin is doing, but on the consultant, like you mentioned briefly, you can have multiple roles. Like you can just like be the Scrum Master and just manage the project, or like project manager, or you can just be the business analyst and gather the requirements and talk to the business. You can be declarative developer, just working with flows and automation processes of like approvals or flows or process builder, or you can just be a developer, or you can be an architect, just designing the solution and working with everybody. And we all have that under the name of the like Salesforce consultants, depending on how it's called. I currently work at Okta, and we have a lot of business technology analysts, which kind of can be misleading title because we do everything from gathering the requirements to building flows and working with integrations. So I think title is not always the best, like representing what you do in the best way. Like you mentioned, like you were internal admin for the partner. I'm pretty sure you knew what's happening with the projects and what they're doing.
Right. And even, today and now at Cirrus, right? Like learn back at a partner again, to your point, learning about the company and the product then informs how I'm thinking about building an integration, because this is going to change. So I need to kind of be aware and keep that in mind. But we also are working with a partner on a project right now, so I can be that resource to them. But I was really nervous about merging orgs. And so having a partner to help bridge that architecture gap, again, just to help facilitate the plans and balance, me doing some of the work and them doing some of the work, right, is so even after over a decade of doing this, right, it's not like I certainly know everything either. So scaling things up and being aware of kind of what we want to do, really, but in the end, to your point, I'm doing it for the most part, right? As opposed to, like you said, at a consultant, I think there's maybe some options for you to how you get involved in the project. And are you the kind of person that wants to learn and ask questions and talk through things, and you don't really care as much about that like aha moment of how it actually gets delivered and building the flow, right? Or are you the kind of person that really likes to like go do the thing and see the result, and you get the confetti and have that output, right? So kind of sometimes you might be both. Do you want to be both? Do you want to look and kind of focus on one or the other?
Exactly. I think wherever you are, like in consultant or in an internal org, you do have to kind of keep growing. I mean, there's probably some consultancies or companies where you can just, like to say, like float around, like not really learn anything and just do the same old thing every day, year round. But we all have in Okta, we have to write like a V2 moms, which has to be aligned with the team and has to be aligned with the department, which has to be aligned with the company. So in a way, even like if you go and build a flow, that flow is automating something that's helping a team that's going to improve the work of the department. The whole, a large group of people is going to be more productive, which is going to positively impact the company. Sure. So even though, as we see it, like I'm improving my skills, there's a larger impact for each and every one of us.
Definitely. And I think regardless of the size team that you're working on, I think staying in touch with that end user impact and really understanding the business drivers for some things can be helpful, especially if you feel like you've kind of just been in this like merger monkey phase of doing grunt work kind of stuff, right? To get back into understanding the vision, I think can be really important, whether it's just on a specific project, right? Or, understanding what your outcomes are and how that, like you said, is the goal to increase customers to then increase revenue. And, sometimes it doesn't feel like creating a field has an impact on that, right? But being able to track those things is what gets us all those fun metrics. So
true.
Would you say there's one that is your favorite? Although I guess if you left consulting and went back to working on a team, then maybe I won't tell if you want to say that's not your favorite.
I think I prefer, like, I'm kind of a nurturer, so I prefer investing into one org and having it growth and have some sort of control. Maybe I'm a control freak, how that thing is going to happen and how it's going to grow, and constantly investing into the same thing. Although I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't had a variety of different projects to work on and get my skills and decide what I want to be and what's like the best use of my experience and my knowledge and where I want to grow when it comes to the knowledge and certification part.
That's a really great point. I think you learn and take away something from each role that you're going to have, right? Positive or negative, right? Maybe you do go and try consulting and learn that you hate it. Or again, that you, go to working for a large consultancy is going to be different than a small, just like an established enterprise company is going to be different than a startup. An established Salesforce org is going to be different than a new Salesforce org. I really like the idea of becoming an admin alongside an implementation. I think that's a really interesting, maybe harder to find, but aside from, those casual conversations where it just all works out and aligns, but learning alongside even consultants that are helping implement a project, right? To get exposure, and like you said, continue your own learning journey, which then leads to the next thing, right? I've been fortunate to meet people or have experiences that have led to conversations in the next role. And really just kind of getting into it has brought those opportunities to me. So
I think what we're saying is there is no like better thing. It's not better to be admin or a consultant. And like Mike Gerhol from the Salesforce Admin Evangelist team keeps saying, there is no such thing as just admin or just a consultant, because it's not just. If you list all the things that you have to know and have to do, it's just different area of business. Do you work with just one org, investing in one org over time, or you work with different orgs and helping different customers with your skills and knowledge?
Yeah. And finding a place to start and taking away the good things you can. And maybe that's the place you end up for forever. And maybe you end up kind of floating a little one direction or another to find the right place for you. So always be learning. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I did want to touch base and see, when you take an Adminute for yourself to, as we mentioned, learn and keep growing your skills, what's one thing you recommend that people check out?
Well, we just mentioned solo admins, and I think military Trailblazer office hours is an amazing thing, not just for solo admins, but for everybody who's struggling. And despite the title, you don't have to be part of the vet force to join. It's happening every Friday. And we're going to share our link, I guess, but you can see that every Friday you can come and you can either have a learning session. Somebody's going to talk. I've recently presented in December about the technical debt, but you can also just come with some of your business problems, ask for a solution, ask for opinion on something that you built, and you will find a really helpful community to provide the feedback. So that's one of the things that doesn't really like a power of Trailblazer community, giving us all the support that we need, even if we don't have anybody, like you mentioned, or anything, like if there is no counterpart. If you're alone, Trailblazer military office hours can be there for you.
I like it. It's interesting too. I feel like because we've been in this virtual world, there's potentially options. So the Charlotte does Charlotte office hours, but again, it's virtual, right? So if you look for those kind of resources, and I wouldn't think of looking at Trailhead Military, right? But I really liked, you mentioned that they do some technology sessions and some career and branding sessions, right? So getting a little bit of both and really just connecting with other people, I think is a great option.
And it's also happening every week. So it's kind of stable. And if you have a problem on Wednesday, you can just wait for Friday to ask your question. It's not like, user group meetings are great. I'm leading Vancouver Admin Group, but we meet once a month. So if you have a problem on January 3rd, and my meeting is January 27th, you can't really wait for like 3 weeks to ask questions. So this is happening every Friday. And I strongly suggest that to everybody to at least check it once.
I like it. A fellow user group leader nerd. I like it. For my Adminute, I found a great recap. Speaking of not pronouncing names well today, I'm going to try to. Santanu Baral, and I'll link to it as well, has a blog called Exploring on Salesforce, and he talks about tips for the new user experience designer certification, which is an interesting newer cert that I've been looking at and hearing more about, which again is one of those admin hats, right? That's kind of experience design is kind of opening up a whole new flavor, whether it's a dedicated person that's managing it for Salesforce as a product for you and your company, or as the admin thinking about usability and optimization and those kinds of things. So he's got 30 certifications, so I think he knows what he's talking about. But he's got some great details about kind of the breakdown and what he did to prepare, and got me thinking, maybe I need to be taking it. Maybe I need to get it scheduled.
That's a great certification. I was privileged enough to actually work on building the certification, creating the questions and curriculum for the first part.
Yeah.
And it was awesome, not just because I was able to shape one of the Salesforce certification. That's really important. Like you mentioned, it's not just admin, it's not just Salesforce designer, it's everybody working on a Salesforce ecosystem. User experience is something that really connects all of us. But also I had a chance to see how hard Trailhead team is working, how much they invest in it, how it's really like we just go and take certification exam, like see those like 50 or 60 questions, and seeing everything that goes into just creating that question bank is just amazing, and it really makes me humble.
Yeah, really got you thinking. I did one that was like a test refresh, and so we had to like rate questions, and it was interesting to think about, like, do I just think this hard? Should this be hard for somebody getting started? Like, where does this fall into? It's interesting to participate in that experience. So yay, certification days. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for joining me. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for inviting me.